Hey, Billy, you know what's awesome?
What's that?
Going to the concert.
Oh, yeah!
What?
All right, so I know your dad was a rocker. My dad was a rocker. Lots of stuff going on. But what was your first show? What was the first show you got to see that you
I
remember?
got to, yeah, I got to see Marty Robbins when I was a very small kid.
Hmm.
uh, so yeah, Marty Robbins. This is probably around 74, 75, somewhere around that. And of course, my dad played in bands, so I was around musicians and bands all the time. So going to see somebody on a big stage was pretty exciting. Of course, Marty Robbins at this point was wearing the Western wear, right, with the studs and the rhinestones, and bringing
Hmm.
out that little bitty guitar he played. And my dad was a huge Marty Robbins fan, so. Uh, and not long after that, I got to see Charlie Daniels. So it started
Nice.
off my, those were kind of my introduction to live on stage big time acts. And then it just kind of spiraled from there. Like I said, my dad said that's when he messed up, is when he bought me the Kiss record. So yeah, I was no longer interested in
In the
Charlie Daniels.
in the country music. Well, see, like I was kind of late to the party because when I was little, we lived in Houston, and then we moved away for like 6 years, and
Mm,
nobody went
yeah.
there. Like I don't remember how old I was, but my parents went and saw George Strait at
Mm,
something in Corpus, and it was a big deal. Like tickets were
sure.
highly expensive. They got a babysitter, which of course, I didn't really care. I was like, okay, whatever, George Strait, right? But we moved back to Houston when I was like 13, so there was not a whole lot of live music in my life up to that point. There was a lot of album rock, a whole lot
Mm,
of, hey son, come listen to this. This is Jimi Hendrix. This is the Beatles. This is Stones.
right.
Whatever. But live music. The first show I actually got to see was the Beach Boys.
Wow.
My dad either acquired tickets or won them off the radio, one of the two. But they played a show. Like, are you familiar with Lakewood Church? You're in Tennessee, so you may or may
Yeah,
not have heard
no,
of it. Lakewood
I
Church
don't
is
think so.
Lakewood Church is one of the largest mega churches in the world. Okay,
Mm,
and Lakewood is down south of Houston, and they started 30 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever. This big old mega church. We had the basketball stadium here in Houston was called the Summit, and they used to have live music,
hmm
and like that's where you went and saw the basketball games. They had hockey. They had they
It's
had
funny you asked me about the church, but I know what the summit is.
okay. Well, if you're familiar with the Summit in Houston, so that was what it was. Well, the Lakewood Church bought the Summit at some point
Oh,
in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's where they have Lakewood Church now. So if you
wow.
go on cable and you look up Joel Osteen Lakewood Church, he's on
Okay,
stage at the Summit. Well, that's
okay.
the Summit's where I saw the Beach Boys. That's my first concert with my dad when I was like 13 years old, and I mean it was pretty awesome. The Beach Boys were I don't I think enough of them have died. I don't even know if they're still playing anymore. But the Beach Boys were a phenomenal act.
Sure.
I mean they're
Yeah, I mean with the harmonies and everything. I mean they're Americana.
yeah.
I mean,
Well, and the Beach Boys were always a fan, because my dad was a surfer in the early
ah,
'60s. So for him, he was always like the like he loved the Beatles and the Stones and everything. But for him, the Beach Boys was
yeah,
that California dream that he never
sure.
quite got to go do. For me, the Beach Boys were another one of my dad's bands that he listened to all the time, and it was okay.
Right.
But I do remember sitting there because we had pretty good seats and watching them harmonize together, and
That's
they'd
cool.
be singing like three, four, 5-part harmonies
Yeah,
sometimes,
just
and
insane.
every
Yeah,
now and then they would just hit it perfectly, and it would just like rattle your teeth because it was just so like
yeah.
the amplifiers and the sound was just so right there. I remember that. I was also like kind of embarrassed as a kid growing up because teenager, I'm like all, you know, want to be
an old folks concert.
Want to be hardcore, but that was my first concert. Now I can appreciate it. When I was a kid, because my second concert was freaking Megadeth. So it was actually.
What do you mean I don't pay my bills?
Right. It was actually a tour with Megadeth, like 91 or 92, something like that.
Wow, you did skip a bit there.
I did, because a buddy of mine who had a car, he's like, "Hey, let's go to the show." I was like, "Awesome, let's go." So we went and saw. But yeah, between the Beach Boys and Megadeth, like it was.
Wow.
And then after that, I was just in love. I was just at every show
Sure.
I could possibly get to. If there was a guitar plugged into an amplifier, I think I was there.
But I believe I was a freshman and sophomore in high school. So there's a difference between going to see your first concert and then there's the concert that you went to on your own, right? And of course, the first concert was me and my cousin, who we were both big Kiss fans, obviously. But this was the Asylum tour, so Animalize had come out, and you were starting to get a lot of concert exposure on MTV. So they would have Saturday night concerts or whatever. So you were actually starting to see these bands. But we heard that Kiss was coming to Memphis, and we asked our parents if they would Nashville. I'm sorry, if they would drive us to Nashville. Tickets were $13 a piece.
Oh yeah.
General admission. In other words, you just walked in and sit wherever you just wanted to. It wasn't assigned seats. And stupid us, we were down on the floor. We were probably 20 rows back and didn't know how close we were to the stage. So we ended up getting on one of the risers on the side. So we wanted to be able to see across the stage better. But we were actually that close, we would have been right there up the front. But our folks literally just dropped us off and just went and did stuff for a few hours while we went to the Kiss concert. And, that's one of those things you just don't forget. It's kind of like you with Megadeth, I'm sure. You're not going to forget that experience of this is my crowd, my people, my band, and the energy that you get from that is just an experience you never forget.
Well, it's funny because, like, Megadeth, like I was a fan of Megadeth. Like I've always been a metalhead, right? But the headliner was Aerosmith, and obviously Aerosmith's got a lot of hits, so it's like you can't really go wrong with going to. But it was an odd pairing, and because you don't really think about Megadeth on tour with Aerosmith because
Well, and because of MTV though, that thing kind of was happening. And so it's the old guard versus the new guard, really. So you're tying them together. It's funny because you would think that you're saying the old guard, but it's freaking Aerosmith. I mean, they had probably more hits in the '90s than they did in any other time.
Exactly, because they were really big in the '90s, and that was the tour kind of on their comeback swing around for. But and then Megadeth, obviously, they ever since they gave him the bus ticket home, Dave Mustaine was churning and burning songs. I mean, making records, touring the world. I mean, Dave Mustaine is an animal.
He's a monster.
Like I remember just being blown away, and just the whole, and we have here in Houston, it's weird. Because Houston, if you ever see these memes, it'll say Houston's an hour away from Houston. Like, the Summit is kind of close to sort of downtown-ish. The Woodlands Pavilion is about an hour north of downtown. So it's like bands would either play at the Summit or they'd play at the Woodlands. And there wasn't really, you'd have club shows and you'd have mid-sized venues, but it would just depend on where they played. Like, and the Summits in the Woodlands is like the most strange white bread suburb of a city that's ever been. When they say it's the Woodlands, so normally whenever they build a development, like build a master plan community, they go in and they cut all the trees down, they pour all the concrete, they build all the buildings, and they plant new trees, name them after the street, name the streets after the trees they cut down. With the Woodlands, they didn't do that. They went in and like kind of carved in everything behind. So whenever you're in the Woodlands and driving around, all you see is trees.
Yeah.
So if you need a Texaco, you better be looking fast or driving at night, because you're not going to see that sign until you're past it, right? And so there's this giant pavilion where they, play concerts, and that's where I've seen most of the bands in the last 30 years that have come through town. That's where they play, because it's a huge facility. But it's also a strange place, because it's this mix of strange suburban properness and then Van Halen.
Yeah. That's Starwood was kind of like that too in Nashville. You had downtown, which was your stadium or pavilion type things, but then you had Starwood, which was out of town on a hillside. It was an outside arena, if you want to call it that, and it was kind of the same thing. You were driving out in the middle of nowhere, and that was an experience all to itself. And for a while, when I lived in Nashville, we lived maybe 2 miles from there. So it was easy to, they would be handing out tickets. You would be leaving a concert, and they'd be handing out tickets for whoever was coming next. We went and seen Meatloaf one night, and walking out, they were handing out free tickets to come see Santana, like the next night.
Oh, wow.
So it was like, you'd say, well, you want to go to a concert after we eat supper? I mean, it became one of those kind of, easy to do kind of things.
That was gonna say, because for me it was never that cheap and easy. Like I always had to buy tickets, but
now I'm 2.5 hours away from anywhere that would have a concert. So it's always been a full weekend road trip if you're going to go to a concert.
We do that now, going to the Woodlands. We get a hotel room and go out there. What was funny is back in the this is being the 90s, because that Aerosmith concert would have been like 91, 92. And I spent the entire 90s pretty much being at a show. Got some fun little stories to tell here in a little while, but so back in the day, you had to buy your tickets from Ticketmaster.
Yep.
And there was no internet back then. There's no smartphones. Tickets go on sale Saturday morning, so you could go.
That was it.
You could go to one of a few places. Well,
stand in line. Stand in line. When when they first started selling the tickets, and hope that you were in line to get them.
Yep. Because sometimes they'd sell out while you were standing in line, and that was not fun. But yeah, our Ticketmaster was in a Foley's. Memorial City Mall had a Foley's. And the Foley's had a customer service department, and the customer service department was in the women's lingerie. So, the store was built, it was 2 stories high, and it was built, it was a big loop, big circle that you go around through the bottom floor and the top floor with everything. And you'd run around, because where you could park, and you'd run around, you'd go around the loop into the ladies' lingerie, and then cut into the customer service department, and then wait in line with all these people that were trying to return crap. You're like, come on, man. I need to buy tickets to go see whatever. And that was an experience, man, because Saturday mornings they'd go on sale at 8 a.m. You and your friends would just all pile in a car, and everybody would run, because they wouldn't sell more than 2 or 4 tickets to any one person, because of scalpers.
Right. Yep.
You're just like,
such a different time now, because now you log on, you push your buttons, you select your seat, and that's it, and it was so much more work just to, you spent more time planning on trying to get the tickets than you did actually going to the show.
Yeah. Well, and then, like you said, your Kiss tickets were $13, and that was the whole thing with Ticketmaster, and Pearl Jam and sued them and stuff. It's because your tickets would be $15, and by the time you walked out, it was $28.
Yeah.
And you if you were not a complete dumbass, you'd realize that everyone, they're like, tickets only $15. You're like, okay, that's 30, 60, 90. That's $120. It's $45 worth of tickets for $120. We gotta think about this.
So let's have some fun with this. I mean, I know we got other stuff to talk about, but what do you feel like is the best concert you've been to?
Man, I would have to top 10 this one because I've been to so many.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm gonna say because it's still up there. Faith No More did the reunion tour in
Wow.
2015.
Yeah.
And Faith No More was a band I never got to see them in their first run. They broke up. Like
Right.
I was a big fan. Angel Dust is a record that's just
Oh,
perfect.
fantastic. Yeah.
And I always liked all of their stuff, but I never got to see them live. And so whenever they came back around 2015, me and a whole bunch of friends bought tickets and went and saw them, and it was phenomenal. But one of the greatest things about it was they kept all the lights on. Like the house lights were down, but the stage lights were on, and they were all dressed in like white linen, so you could see them sweat. You could actually see them play their instruments, and whenever they would do anything, you could tell it was real. There was no backing track. There was no There was no lights. It was just like, this is a band playing their songs. Yeah. And I'm one of those people that I've seen enough shows that every now and then a band will make a mistake, and
sure,
I like that because it makes it more real. It's those people, like, they're on stage actually playing instruments. It's not just some run through. You know what I mean? So Faith No More, they didn't mess up, but you could see Mike Patton's vocals, Adam's apple moving around whenever he's singing and stuff, and that's certainly in my top 5.
Wow.
It's How about yourself?
I have to go with Queensryche. I got to see Queensryche in 1990. It was the Empire tour, but they did Operation Mindcrime in its entirety, which is one of my favorite albums ever. And I took a buddy of mine that we played in the band together, and he was a big Queensryche fan too, but he didn't want to go see him where we were seeing him. It was downtown in Nashville. And he was like, man, Municipal just has terrible sound. I went and seen Yes there. I've seen Rush there. The sound's not good. Blah, blah, blah. And this concert was literally like being picked up, thrown into a movie.
Nice.
With headphones, and then the lights just come on, and you're sitting there going, what just happened? Man, so it's right opposite of what you were talking about, because I love a raw, in-your-face concert, but I also appreciate a great production when it's working and you're still actually working. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely.
In other words, it's like, people always talked about how great Michael Jackson is live. Well, he is to an extent, but half the time he's not singing, right?
Yeah, because dancing,
so,
you
because you can't.
Yeah, if dancing like that, you'd get out of breath.
Yeah, so you gotta you balance that out. These guys played every note, but they had a track going though behind to keep everything in its entirety. But I've never seen visuals at a show like this, man. You may remember there's a video for, I think it's Union of the Snake by Duran Duran. And there's a scene where it looks like these pieces of glass are falling in the crowd, and the crowd kind of raises their hands. That happened at this show. Wow. There was a scene where they had 2 video screens that would become big eyes. And they had this Queensryche logo, which is, the wings with the spike, their logo. And they had these lights that were in the crowd that would come up, and it looked like daggers coming down into the crowd. And it showed Jeff Tate running on the screen, and he ran and he jumped through the screen, and it shattered into glass. And all the glass fell out into the crowd, but it was all lights. And it was just like, it was the most unreal thing. They made it rain on stage, but it wasn't raining, and the sound quality was unreal. And, like I said, we turned the lights on, and when they turned the lights on, my buddy just looked at me and said, I can't believe what we just saw. And, that was one for the books, man. And what's funny is what's second to that, because I'm a big Kiss fan, and they're still my favorite shows, but the second best show, and my wife would love to hear me say this, freaking Barry Manilow, man.
That's awesome.
she drugged me to go see Manilow, right? She's a Manilow fan, and it was unreal, man. You talking about somebody that is good live, man. It was really impressive.
Dude, there's a lot of those old guard guys that are like they're just good, you know, like they didn't get famous because they weren't good. And you know, you're talking about that experience at that show, and probably my most mind-blowing would be 9 Inch Nails.
Oh yeah.
Not 9 Inch Nails 1994 Halloween night in the Summit, which was, you know, now Lakewood Church, right? So 9 Inch Nails was on tour with Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
And so we had tickets to this show for Halloween night, and my buddy was like, dude, we got to go see Pulp Fiction. So we went and watched Pulp Fiction in the theater with popcorn and the pocket beers, and watched the Quentin Tarantino masterpiece on screen, and then got out of there and looked at her like, oh, well, Marilyn Manson's probably playing by now. Like, we gotta get our butts to the Summit. I'm driving my parents' minivan. Like, get there, park, get out, get up. We were not able to buy floor seats because they'd sold out. So we had arena chairs, and we're like, okay, well, this sucks because we want to be on the floor. We want to be like right under the stage, and here we are. Like, we've got assigned seats, and they got their securities, like, got their flashlights, and they're shining up the rows, being like, bah, 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 bah. So I'm standing there, and this is, you know, obviously my 9 Inch Nails days. I've got like torn pants and like black t-shirt and long hair, and it's dyed black, and I probably had Halloween, so I probably had makeup on my face, and this girl taps me on my shoulder, and she was like, I'm like, yeah. She's like, are you gonna go? I was like, go. She's like, as soon as the lights go down, we're all gonna go over the barricade. And I look, and there's all of these people on the back side of the thing, like, kind of do this wave, and it's like the wave. It's like several hundred people are like, me too, we're all doing it. So me and my buddy, like, bro, we're going over this barricade. Like, as soon as this thing breaks, we're running. And lights go down, everybody starts hitting, boom, crash the barricade, run. I run far enough out, and I look back, and I realize that my buddy's tied up in, because the little barricade thing, he's down, and his feet are wrapped up in the barricade, like he crashed it somehow. And so I go run back, and I pull him out of there, and the security guard lights come chase us. We go run, get all the way up to the front. Show's on. Like, we made it. It's amazing. And we're right under the stage while 9 Inch Nails is playing. Like, boom. And then we realize, like, 2 songs into it, that I'm thirsty and we can't leave. There's no going to the beer aisle. There's no getting the water. There's no water fountains. We've done busted the barricade. We're stuck. But I ended up watching that show. It was amazing. They filmed part of it for some of their videos later. Absolutely transcendent. I mean, 9 Inch Nails. Yeah. I saw them a couple of times, 3 or 4 times. They're amazing. I saw them with David Bowie. Wow. When he was doing the whole I Hate Americans thing. Yeah. And or I'm Afraid of Americans. I'm Afraid of Americans. Yeah. And we saw that show up in Austin, and just. But yeah, 9 Inch Nails, if you ever get a chance, certainly worth going to. But man, that's way up there too. I don't know. I'm like, dude, I've seen a lot of shows.
And of course, the big one for me too is probably the Kiss reunion tour, because I had seen them so many years out of makeup, which is the Kiss I grew up with. I mean, you know, they quit wearing the makeup when I was 9 years old. Well, no, I was 12 years old. But I never got to see them up until that point. So the Kiss that I got to go see in concert was always the non-makeup era. And it's amazing, as many times as I've seen them, with the platform boots and the makeup and stuff, they literally are larger than life on stage. They look twice the size of normal people. And it's hard to even convey that in your head till you see it live, just how gargantuan they look on stage when they're in the regalia. And, come on, man. I mean, it's that reunion tour was just a nostalgia trip for everybody that didn't get to experience it. And that's one of those things I'll never forget either, just because I couldn't get over the fact of how larger than life they were. So it really brought back the idea of being a kid and looking at the picture on the inside of Alive 2 and going, wow, look at the stage. And so, yeah, I mean, fantastic. This last tour they're doing, even though Paul can't sing, the sound quality is probably the best they've ever had.
Really?
Yeah.
What happened to Paul? Paul can't sing.
Oh, his voice is just shot, man. I mean, he's just been doing it too long, and he should have quit about 10 years ago, actually. And, he struggles, and, he's always been a guy that talks to the crowd, how many people over here, and all that kind of stuff, and he don't have it no more, man. It's just, he sounds like an old Jewish lady,
Yeah.
Let me tell you something.
Well,
I mean, it's just like, it's gone, and it breaks my heart, but, the show is still phenomenal. And the sound is really, really good.
I was gonna say, because that's one of those things when you watch somebody lose their voice in real time, like Pantera. Like, I don't know if you're ever a Pantera fan, but it's like if you listen like Cowboys from Hell, and you just listen to the range, because he can go from a deep, angry growl all the way up to that high pitched, like 80s high pitched scream, and he, excuse me, he can go from grungy to clean in one breath, like,
right.
And then
blew it out.
Saw him playing on, like I saw Pantera a lot with, like, I saw him with Type O Negative, some, and where he's just like, he doesn't have any more. He's like, he's skipping words. He's just hitting beats. He's like, it's
right.
It's motion.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, no, that's like a string of words, and then, like that's a bent squeal guitar wail that you should go up. And he was doing that before Dimebag died. So,
right. Well, and it's that thing too, and we all get older. I mean, Paul Stanley's pushing 70.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what kind of vocal range are you expecting? And then, but look at all of our guys from that time period. I mean, they were doing this stuff in their heyday, in their 20s, when they were indestructible, and now you can't really pull it off. Don Dokken is terrible now. Joe Elliott from Def Leppard, he can't sing half the songs anymore. And that was always the thing with Robert Plant. They always talked about why Zeppelin never got back together. He's like, because we want to leave it the legend that it is, because if we got up there, we're just a shell of who we used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I respect that,
Dude, I never realized since before I got my voice fixed, like, I'm not doing anything loud or anything, right? Like, I'm not doing anything at all. But I'll just sit there and hum along to songs that I haven't been able to, like, I'm hitting notes that I haven't been able to hit in 10, 15 years. And I'm not trying to hit notes. I'm not a singer. I'm not trying to rehab anything, but just, something will come on the radio and I'll just kind of be like, do 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 do. I'm like,
hey, those notes are there.
Hey, yeah, like, I don't feel that constriction in there anymore. Like,
yeah,
I think there's probably a lot of people in there that if they actually had their throat scoped, they'd find that there was some stuff that needed to be taken out. I don't know if they'd want to go on 14 days not being able to talk, though, because that's...
And what's amazing is you got people out there that you would think... I always think of Robin Zander from Cheap Trick, which... I don't know how big of a Cheap Trick fan you are, but you're talking about a powerhouse vocalist. This guy is kind of like what you're talking about with Phil Alonso, Phil Alonso. I can't even say his name. Anselmo. Anselmo. He has that range where it's full on yell to notes. And Zander's been doing it all these years, and he still got it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, how is that even possible? You know,
when I went through it, my speech therapist, because when I had the surgery, basically I walked into the place and I was like, hey, I keep losing my voice, and they put a scope in my nose and they're like, yeah, see that? That's why.
mm-hmm.
We're gonna take that out of there. So then, of course, they took it out of there. They're like, don't talk. Didn't talk. Started trying to talk. Couldn't do it. It was like physically not there.
Yeah.
I would say words, and my voice was way back, far in my throat, and I would sound like a little whisper of myself. So I'd go to speech therapy, and she was like, okay, well, that's normal because all this has to be reshaped. But your neck, not your throat, but your neck muscles have wrapped themselves around.
Yep.
Just trying to manage, so you have to let them go. So you have to pull on your Adam's apple. You have to do the speech therapy and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was making room for the thing that was in there and just adapting to it. So you remove it, and then you get this gap.
Right. Well, and she said and she said it was very candidly. She's like, yeah, you try to do a whole bunch of basically vocal musical screaming without the proper training, because you have to be trained to do that. That's not it's not a natural skill. That's something that you build up to. I'm like, yeah, oh, okay. So those guys, she's like, those guys get paid a lot. They have vocal coaches. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, cool.
I mean, you found them here and there that just had that know how to do it naturally, like a Rob Halford or somebody like that. Michael Sweet from Stryper. I mean, these guys they're already so high pitched in the first place, and then when they take it up into that falsetto range, it's almost a natural thing for them.
For me, it was the growl.
Yeah.
I did that, and then did that enough that I turned into my normal voice.
AC/DC, you always think, you never realize how high Brian Johnson's really singing till you start singing the stuff, and you like, man, how does he get that sound? And then you hear him talk. Well, the other day, it's like, well, that's just the way he sounds. Right. So okay, how about this? What's the worst concert you went to? What do you think was just a big letdown?
Okay, so probably a best and a worst, same band was Tool. Not the same show.
Holy smokes. Yeah.
But Tool played in 1994, 1995 on their Anima tour. Yeah. It was a club show, and the band just had it. They were on. It was just amazing. It was like one of those shows that's just transcendent. It was just amazingly good. And then some 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know, and same band 25 years later, and just boring, just phoning it in like they didn't.
Yeah.
And it was just like, dude, I've seen you guys before. I know you have it. And they're just, all of the notes are there, but their stage lights were down. They weren't doing anything. And again, another big letdown. This was several years ago, but the Twins of Evil tour. It was Rob Zombie and Marilyn Manson. Yeah. And so I missed Marilyn Manson with 9 Inch Nails because I was watching Pulp Fiction. So I'd seen Marilyn Manson on club shows before they got famous. But he came out and was just going through the motions. Yeah. Sucked.
Yeah. At that point, he kind of, that's the same tour where he pulled that gun over on top of him, right? They had a big prop. It was like a big gun.
Yeah. It was just,
and he went back and stumbled and it fell on top of him.
Yeah. It was just dumb. And
like a Stonehenge moment, for Spinal Tap or something.
And so then my wife and I went because we're both fans of I've always liked Marilyn Manson. I've never been a fan of Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got some good songs. I like that whole Alice Cooper sort of.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's all I got out
you
of it
know,
was, hey, this is the new generation's version of Alice Cooper, just with not as good of songs.
right. So like he's got some great songs, but
Yeah.
not a huge fan. But I've always loved White Zombie since the beginning. I've loved
yeah.
White Zombie, Rob Zombie, the whole works.
Yeah.
Marilyn Manson was so boring because it was Twins of Evil, so it was huge, like big double bill.
Yeah.
The tickets were like $80, and so we had two of them. So then we were babysitters in, we were hotels in. Like we spent like $300 or $400 on this show. And,
wow.
And Marilyn Manson sucks. Like this sucks. And then,
well, you
thank God
you
Rob Zombie came out and like completely cleaned it up because he just lit the place on fire and was just like, that's a guy he's a ringmaster. He's in his element.
Absolutely,
that's what he was born to do. It was just amazing. So like we're sitting over there like, this sucks. Okay. It doesn't suck so much anymore. We're happy now So
did John 5 play for both of them?
John 5 played for Manson or for Zombie only.
Okay.
My God,
because I know there for a while he was kind of playing both bills there. So
yeah, I think because Manson can't get along with anybody, so he just runs through guitar players. So John 5 knows all the songs.
Yeah.
It was sweet. Have you ever watched any John 5 outside of his bands?
Oh, yeah. His solo stuff is amazing.
Just seen him at home running a metronome. He's such a dork. Like he's got his little curly cowboy hat on, and he's just like all happy-go-lucky, and he's just like, oh yeah, like.
Well, he grew up a Hee Haw fan. Yeah, I mean, when I found that out, I mean he loves the chicken picking stuff, and he's really good at it.
He is, and that's why I was like, I don't mean that in no insult to say he's a dork, but he's just like you see him all painted up with his death metal stuff going on, and you're like, okay, that guy, I wouldn't like that guy's kind of scary. And then you see him at home, and he's all like, hey man,
he wants to be Roy Clark,
Yeah, like Hee Haw is awesome. It's like I had a much giant respect for him. Like watching some of his just he was on. Well, they did a thing on YouTube. The Guitar Center did a thing on YouTube where he got to play all these classic guitars.
Yeah, that's what I was going to talk about. Yeah,
where he's just every time they handed him something, he was so excited. But then he played it better than anybody who's ever played it. I'm just like,
because they gave him Paul Stanley's Ibanez, right? And of course he starts playing all the Kiss tunes, and he's just like, this is like a dream come true. And then he'd grab the telly that was Jimmy Page's or. And just burn them up, man. And, he's kind of what I think of Nuno Bettencourt. He's kind of this mishmash of, you take these great guitar players of the past and you put them together in one package, and he creates his own style out of that. That's really what John 5 is. He's one part Eddie Van Halen, one part Ace Frehley, one part Jimmy Page, one part, like I said, Glenn Campbell. I mean, he's got all these elements. And look what it makes. It makes somebody that gets on stage and can do things that nobody else can really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dude. That whole he did a thing where he was at his house. He's doing like a lesson. I don't know. I'm sure you saw it. But he's like, he's got his guitar, he's got his pick, and he's like, yeah. So one of the things, and he's got a guy with him like talking about guitar. The dude's just sitting there, and he's like, yeah, one of the things I like to do is I like to set my metronome. He's like, clicks it. It's like, click, 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 click. He goes in, and he's like, then I hit my notes, and they're kind of like, bump, 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 diddle-dit-dump, bump, diddle-dit-dump, diddle-dit-diddle-dit-diddle-dit-dump, and he's just like tapping, and the whole thing starts catching on fire, and this dude's just sitting there just watching him. And he just like, then he finishes, and the metronome's still like, click, clock, click, clock. And he's like, yeah, and then I just kind of like do that, and my wife gets annoyed. And it's just like him just sitting on his coffee, like at his couch, his coffee table is just like, stop doing all that noisy doing things, babe. Like I'm watching TV upstairs.
I'm paying the bills, baby. So yeah, worst concert for me. Yeah, it's funny because I can blame my wife for some of them and praise her for some of the other ones, but she got tickets to go see Bonnie Raitt and Bruce Hornsby.
Yeah, I would imagine that sucks.
Well, Bonnie Raitt's a great guitar player. I mean, people don't really know that about her. She's an iconic slide player that people don't really know that. But this is when she had her big, give them something to talk about hit. So she was on top again. Bruce Hornsby was the opening act, and it might as well have just been dinner music, man, because there was people sitting around us, and they were like, and we went today to this place, and it was fantastic. I mean, you could hear these people way over the music, right? It was just so boring. And then Bonnie Raitt came out, and she really just didn't put on a show or anything. It was just kind of, yep, I'm here, and that's it. And we were both very disappointed in that.
That was one of those things because, the day in my life that we talked about, those places you would go back and revisit. Lollapalooza '94, right? So
wow,
it was Green Day. We had L7. It was a big thing. But the headliner for that show was Smashing Pumpkins.
Yep.
And the pre-liner was Beastie Boys. And I got to tell you, don't ever put the Beastie Boys up against Smashing Pumpkins, because what you'll end up having is the Smashing Pumpkins will have everybody just leave at the end.
Wow.
Because the whole day, I mean, you had all of these bands. You had George Clinton, the P-Funk All-Stars, and you had it was just, you remember Lollapalooza, they used to dump bands to like none of them had anything to do with each other, but and then you'd have bands like, as Lollapalooza through the summer would happen, you'd have bands like Tool that started on the third stage, then moved to the second stage, and by the end were headlining, because that's how fast it took to get that big. Was just several weeks because of MTV and stuff.
It was happening so quick.
Yeah. And this particular show, God, man, the Beastie Boys came out, and we talked in the previous episodes, how I woke up to the Beastie Boys at Boy Scout camp. I've always been a fan of the Beastie Boys, but I was never a big fan of hip hop. I could appreciate a song that was on. I wouldn't sit there and walk around and listen to records, because I was always
I'm with you. Yep, rock. We were the rock dudes.
Rock and roll. But man, you put the Beastie Boys on stage.
Yeah.
It was, I remember there were certain points during their set, because the sun was going down, because they were the right before the headliner. So the sun was going down behind the hill, and they do certain things, and if you step back and looked around, it looked like, like whenever you go to the zoo and you feed carp, and they're just flipping around, tails are flipped, and it was like that for as far as the eye could see. People are jumping together, they're flipping around. It was just amazing. The Beastie Boys come off stage, and you're just like, okay, that was the best day ever. And then the Smashing Pumpkins come on, and they're like, dun, dun, just boring and mad, boring and angry. Yeah. And it was just like, oh man, they should have flipped that bill real fast. It would have been awesome if the Smashing Pumpkins would have played, and then the Beastie Boys could have brought it up and just sent it home.
Yeah.
And
that's, and there's been several shows like that too, man, that you're like, the opening band should have been the headliner. I couldn't imagine a situation like that where you're following the Beastie Boys, because their music's not going to be perfect, but that's not what it's about. Mm-hmm. They're up there to get you riled up, get you pumped up, jumping around. That's their shtick. That's what it is.
Literally, that's all they are, is a giant, massive pump up.
Right. Yeah. And how do you come down from that with, a goth dude with his, head shaved and, it's just, and no disrespect to Smashing Pumpkins. I like a lot of their songs, but you can't contrast those two and be effective, like you're saying. It's just a mismatch.
Yeah, it was
It's like the Scorpions opening for Merle Haggard. You
right.
know,
Well,
it's just such a mismatch. It just doesn't make sense. You know.
well, my uncle said he watched. He went to a show. He went to a Black Sabbath show in like I don't know, like 81, 82, and the opening band was Van Halen. Said,
Oh
and
yeah,
he said Sabbath
yeah.
Sabbath just could not bring the
Well,
crowd back because Van Halen was just so insane, and nobody had seen it before. This was before Van
right.
Halen was even famous. They were kind of on their way up, and Black Sabbath brought them along on tour, and then
Well,
just like,
this
whoa,
this is the you're coming up towards the end of Sabbath, so this is where probably Ozzy's already left. If he's not, he's definitely not the Ozzy of the early Sabbath. Then if it's not him, it's Dio singing, which is, don't get me wrong, it's great. But this new blood, like we said earlier, the new blood coming on, and again, come on, it's freaking Eddie Van Halen. I mean,
right. Well, Eddie Van Halen,
it's one thing.
David
It's one
Lee
thing to
Roth.
have David Lee Roth out there jumping around doing his thing, but when you got a guitar player that's doing these things that don't even sound like a guitar, you know, and it's not angry, bitter music. It's fun, uplifting. Have a party mentality. Yeah, I mean, I could imagine.
I just wish I was a fly on a wall on any of those shows because that would have been.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, so you hear a lot of those stories. That's the phenomenon of Kiss, right? I mean, when they first had their first album come out, they were opening for Blue Oyster Cult, and then a year later, Blue Oyster Cult was opening for them. That's how much of an impact they made so fast,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just because of the show, and you have to have that total package. With that being said, another show that really surprised me, it was fantastic. I got to see NXS on the Kick tour.
Oh,
So
dude, I'm jealous.
it was unreal, man. I mean, it was a fantastic show.
Yeah, dude, when I so that was like 87, obviously. 87 is
Yeah.
the year, but 87, I remember there was so much stuff coming out, but the NXS Kick, Def Leppard Hysteria, it was like MTV, just that was all there was.
Yep.
It was like basically that I Need You Tonight video, the
Yep.
and then Pour Some Sugar on Me and Love Bites, and I always was
Yep.
like, dude, these are two bands, and there's two bands I never saw because Hutchins checked out too early,
Yep.
and
Right.
I've never seen Def Leppard, but I just like 1987 was just like that was the soundtrack.
big year.
Those two bands were pretty. I mean, there was
Yeah.
a lot of other bands, but like those two bands are two just.
Yeah. It was a great show, and Ziggy Marley opened up. So Bob Marley's son was the opening act. It's like, again, just like, okay, this is different.
I would have loved seeing that. That would have been.
It was great.
Just.
It was great. And we got to see Bon Jovi on the New Jersey tour, and Blue Murder opened up, which is John Sykes, Carmine Appice, and Tony Franklin, a 3-piece band.
Wow.
Came out there and just smoked it, man. And, and of course nobody cared because all the girls were there to see Bon Jovi, But musically, man, John Sykes came out there and just killed it. So that was good.
So in 1991, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Faith No More were on tour together.
Yeah.
And on that 91 tour, basically, that was when Axl caused a bunch of riots in Toronto or Montreal.
Is that the same year Hetfield got caught on fire too?
Hetfield got caught on fire, and Faith No More wasn't big enough to really. I mean, they were on tour with these guys, but they were by no means Guns N' Roses or Metallica, as far as stature. So they all went their separate ways. So I missed that show. I didn't get to go in 91. I've seen them all separately. I've seen Metallica 2 or 3 times. I've seen Guns N' Roses once. It was a great show. It was on the reunion tour a couple of years ago. Axl, like we were talking earlier, Axl started off not being able to hit the notes, and then he
Mm-hmm.
warmed up, and then he played a show, and he was able to hit the notes. Like, Slash is always pretty consistent.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Duff only has to play the bass, and we don't know
Yeah.
I don't know who the drummer was, but Axl is the wild card in that because, you know, like,
Sure.
it could be his own fault, and he still gets pissed
Yeah.
off and makes meth.
Well, it's that same thing though. I mean, you've sang in that high register all these years, and it catches up with you.
Right.
You know, he was having trouble even in '91. If you go back and actually look at it versus what he was doing with Appetite. I mean, he had already done some damage.
Yeah. So the Guns N' Roses show, I don't know if I'll like if they come back around. I will buy a ticket because it was entertaining. It was fun.
Yeah.
I'll always Slash is like my spirit animal. I'll
Sure.
always I love Slash. Whatever Slash is doing is cool in my book. I always said like Slash, man, like there's all other people, and then there's Slash, and he's standing on a box because I don't care how horrible of a human he might be.
Yeah.
Just that top hat, the hair in his face, the glasses, the leather jacket, and the Les Paul. That's all I care about.
That's what Ace Frehley always was for me, man. It's weird because I've always been a drummer, but the persona of him, he's the one that doesn't talk, right? He's got the guitar, you know, he's just a more glamorous kind of Slash, right? I mean, that's basically what he was, an alcoholic that stumbled around everywhere and smoke come out of his guitar, and, you know, he made faces. He made big round mouth vibrato sounds on his guitar, you know? And it personified everything rock and roll to me. And no matter what instrument I play, Ace was always that inspiration. Yeah.
And, you know, not one band I've seen a lot of times, and they're one of my favorite bands of ever. Probably Disintegration is probably the best record that's ever been pressed, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
But I've seen The Cure a lot, and one thing that The Cure never did, like, I've seen a lot of bands that are like, okay, we're going to go with the screen. We're going to go with the... it's just going to be a whole bunch of silly lights up in the air, and you're just going to, like, forget about the fact that we're a backtrack band.
Yeah.
I've seen The Cure probably 5 or 6 times in the last 15 years, and they're always stripped. It's hot amps. Like, you can tell when somebody, like, whenever they're not playing and they touch their instrument, it's like they fix it, and then they turn it back up, and then they play their songs. Like you were talking about Queensryche. It's like when they lock in, they're perfectly locked in, but their amps are hot, and they're a stripped down punk rock band from the 70s.
Yeah.
With a whole bunch of songs that people know. And I can't say that any one Cure show is like my best or favorite or whatever, but they're one of my favorite bands to see live for that very reason, is because they don't mess around. They're like, that guy messed up. Like, I'm talking, like, what's your problem over there? Like, you tune, like, what's your deal? And I appreciate when a band's completely locked in. I also appreciate when you can tell that they're live and they're not just phoning it in.
I like you want the balance, right? You want it to where, give me the performance, but don't give me a crappy performance, right? Give me a good show, but don't make it totally about the show, right? So it's that balance that's, you know, that's the artists that really stand out. And you have to decide what side of the fence you're on. And when you don't really make that decision, you're a band that kind of gets forgotten about, right? I mean, you've got to be able to deliver some level. You know, to me, it's like I could never, you know, I'm one of those people, I never was a big Eagles fan, right? And it just didn't appeal to me, man. I mean, it's like, if you want to be a country band, be a country band. If you're going to be a rock band, be a rock band. You know, same thing to Gin Blossoms and all those bands. Make up your mind what you are, then come back, and then we'll go from there. But I've seen so many things of the Eagles live, and I'm like, here's a group of guys that don't even look at each other the whole time they're playing. What's the point, right?
They don't.
You know?
Yeah, they certainly don't seem to be having fun. Like this is their job. They just showed up and they're just like
Yeah, and that's an insult, man. And you know, my wife has a bad taste for Dokken because when we went and seen Dokken, this is later day. Don Dokken was on some painkillers or something because he had a like a sea-doo wreck or something earlier that day out on the water. But he was just a total a-hole, sang half the words, didn't sing, didn't care. And it was a bad example of somebody who actually had, some decent chops back in the day. And from that, you ruin what it is you built upon. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about earlier with some of the bands you saw that were just kind of the letdown because, man, you had it,
Well,
and you just throw it away.
And that's what I'm saying. Is like I'm not praising bands for making mistakes. I appreciate it whenever you're watching a live show that's a huge production.
Yeah.
And they could very easily just play the tape. And the band just has
exactly.
Band has to just stand there and collect a paycheck.
Yeah.
I appreciate it whenever that feedback does hit unexpectedly, and the band looks at each other like that was unexpected. Yeah. It doesn't make them play any less good. Like their songs are not affected, or every now and then, like it's like I said with Guns N' Roses, like Axl was not very good in those first two songs, but he warmed up into it.
Yeah,
and again, they weren't just playing a tape to collect a bunch of money, because if you look at the crowd, it's like place seats like 40,000 people, and every one of them paid $100 to be here. Like that sucks. Yeah. I want to know, because I've seen bands where the guy's just standing on stage by himself with a guitar and playing a song, and I don't want them to mess up. I want them to be them. I want them to play the song that we paid them to play. And, there's like every now and then they mess up. And like, well, that's not good.
Hey, but that's good at the same time because, again, it just shows you, hey, I wasn't born a virtuoso. I had to get there.
Exactly.
Right? And I don't know. It's amazing because... of course, I imagine you're like me. You grew up listening to a lot of AC/DC. It's just kind of a given. And I'm not dissing AC/DC by any means. I saw them on the Razor's Edge tour, their biggest tour, I guess. And when the lights were on and they were playing, they were fantastic. But when the lights went off in between songs, there was no interaction with the crowd. It was just black, nothing going on. And I thought, man, this is the part I crave. I crave the... How's everybody doing tonight? Hope everybody the David Lee Roth spiel, right?
Mm-hmm. Of course.
You want that interaction because that's why we're here. We're here to celebrate you guys, and we want to be a part of that. And when you just play your song and turn it off, you never say thanks, any of that stuff. It just seems so you might as well just play the tape,
That's one of those that, again, those concerts with the band and the other band that might have been good. We remember the 90s bands Counting Crows and Live. Live was a much bigger band than Counting Crows, but they were on a double bill in the late 90s. And the Counting Crows kind of had a reputation for being like one of those bands where the singer would just kind of go off on tangents and the band would just play a background kind of tune to what he was talking about, and then they like drop back into the song.
Right. And then live, you had the dude that looked like the character off of Nightbreed.
Right. Well, on this particular night, live was on fire, and Counting Crows was boring as hell. Counting Crows was the headliner, and sometime during Live's break between Live and Counting Crows, or during their whatever, It's like, oh, hey, it's my anniversary tonight. So the guy from Live brings his girl out on stage, and they drink a champagne toast, and to kind of go into this musical thing where he sings her, a sweet little love song. Then they leave, and then Counting Crows starts, and you're like, okay, if you're going to follow that up, like, I mean, this dude just poured out his heart. He wrote her a special little acoustic guitar song, and he played it live in front of all these people, and she cried, and it was awesome. You'd expect a little bit of that Storytellers sort of vibe, because Counting Crows, they were known for that. Nope.
Yeah.
Hit play, played the songs, got out, thank you, good night. We don't even know where we're at.
Wow. Yeah.
We'll see you tomorrow. It's like,
well, and you know what? You never know what's going on with the band either. I mean, that's the pressures of all that is what splits bands up. But you have to be able to set all that stuff aside, get on stage, make your money, give the crowd what they want, and then settle your differences off the stage.
Yep.
And that's I've never understood that mentality of carrying that
on stage with
you. And let that be a factor to a crowd that has saved up their hard-earned money, to come see you perform. And that's exactly why I'm a Kiss fan, because that's exactly what Paul Stanley said about growing up. He said, man, I'd save my money for weeks to go see Led Zeppelin, and they'd come out in their dirty jeans and stand there and half drugged out. And he's like, man, I don't feel like I got my money's worth.
Mm-hmm.
So they were a reaction to that, So, yeah, I mean, you have to deliver on that level. I mean, you're not going to see you can't find a Queen concert where Freddie is just
right.
Right.
Well, even going further back to like the Doors. This was one of those things because, again, my dad being who he was, he's like in the mid to late 80s, whenever the Doors started just kind of really coming back, I'm like, oh, yeah. This is Doors. I remember at some point he took me aside. He's like, dude, let me. He's like, the Doors were not big enough to open for Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
He's like, Jimi Hendrix was, but they're both kind of cut from that same cloth. They're both like psychedelic rock. They both kind of come from San Francisco, LA. They're just kind of floating around that whole world. Jimi Hendrix was from Seattle, but still he was British invasion. Like Jimi Hendrix did his, but he's like, no. The Doors don't deserve to be on the same poster with Jimi Hendrix, because Jimi Hendrix would have just burned the doors off of them.
Yeah, how do you compete? It's Jimi Hendrix.
Well, it's just like you said, because they were inconsistent. They were not.
Yeah. Oh, you never knew what Jim Morrison you were going to get. Am I going to get the one that's going to pass out in the third song, or am I going to get
Transcendent,
the one that right, the one that keeps his back to the crowd the whole time? What am I getting here? And
I think that's what they Tool does that. We're like, oh man, come on. It's like everybody loves you now. It's like everybody who's ever loved you is paying too much to come see you. You should at least show up.
Well, you can. I always think of they kind of get a little too full of themselves, and the self-importance thing I think starts running rampant, and that's always a problem, because I always think about Sting, right? Sting is Sting, but without the police, who would Sting be, right? And
he'd still be a teacher named Gordon,
right? So I mean, to me, I was so thrilled when they finally decided to kind of get back together and do the thing, because that's what made all the magic happen, was those three together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Sting's a great musician. They're all great musicians, but it's the chemistry of them together is what makes the magic. And I think Sting had a successful solo career, but it's that self-importance thing to me, It's kind of like Bono.
Yep.
Bono just is really full of himself, and I think hopefully if we've learned anything out of all this quarantine and stuff, is that celebrities are just people, just like you and me. And you see them wigging out and going out of their minds because they're not getting the attention they're used to.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that it brings that humbleness back down to where, hey, you're just a person like everybody else. You're fortunate to have a career like you do.
Exactly. Like, that was like the whole Marilyn Manson, Rob Zombie thing. It's like, Rob Zombie's always just been about monster movies. He's just like Marilyn Manson's like, I'm preaching from a pulpit. Like, no, stop doing that. You're just monster movie too, and yes, those sticks kind of fall apart because as soon as your fans grow up and realize that you're full of crap, then whatever. Then Rob Zombie's like, well, I've been talking about monster movies since the 80s. You're like, dude, monster movies rock. We have entire podcasts about how awesome you are because you're not so full of yourself that you understand what it is that makes you you. So, well, hey, man.
Yeah, and
that has been an awesome thing. I'm looking at the thing. I'm also looking at the other thing. It's been an awesome talk about concerts. We should have made this a two-parter because I could go on for a while. Just, dude, like all the stuff we talked about was only like 6. I've been to like 200.
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's about time we close this episode down. So
hey, and let's not forget the people that listen to us, or there's part of the Facebook group there. Hey, if you've got pictures from shows you've been to, or just want to talk about what your favorite shows were that you went to, make sure you share that stuff with us, man. It's all interactive. We don't want to be too big for our britches either.
Agreed.
Because we're so successful.
Post the pictures, comment on the bands that you love. Like I said, we talked about like 6. I've seen a couple hundred bands. So if you're like, oh, well, what about these guys? Or what about those guys and these other guys? So, love to talk to you. It's been great. Until next time, let's keep it awesome.